You just can't resist using your big moments, huh? Superhero movies. I know you're here for the review, but I need to explain how I watch the Spider-Man movies. If you've seen my video showing my physical media collection, you'll notice that I own Spider-Man 1, 2, and Amazing Spider-Man 2, and people obviously know that I don't support a product when it's very bad. That's the only thing that works to stop companies from making more garbage. I'm the type that does not care if I'm missing Harry Potter 4 when I own the other 7 films. If you're bad, you're bad. So why on earth did I get Amazing 2? It first starts off with Spider-Man 3. Big fan of the first 2 films. When I first heard they were going to do the Venom story, I was like, yes, thank you. The animated series did a really good job on it. Raimi loves Spider-Man. It'll all be good. And then Sandman and then Harry Osborn happened. Thank you, Sony. Everything went to mush. I only saw it once and that was it. I didn't care about the whole Spider-Man 4 stuff. I was going to wait till they showed me they cared about the story again. Obviously it never happened. Sony decided to reboot the series, new actor, new continuity line. I was fine with that. You want to move on from Toby, this can give him a second shot at a Venom movie done right. But then I heard they were going to do the origin story again. Really? It's not been that long. It's not like 30 years have passed or they pulled a Hulk where they never did the origin story. To be fair, they did put Lizard in it. It's origin story but has a new villain. Even though I still decided to not watch the first film, I waited for the second one. Amazing 2 was the last time I didn't read up on who was handling the production team. That's why I bought Amazing Spider-Man 2. I avoided spoilers as much as I could, so I went in blind. Never again did I do that. Moving forward, now I check who writes the film, who's involved with the film, then look at their past works, and when I did that, I understood why the movie was in such a stupid shape. It had the exact same problems as Spider-Man 3, but 5 times worse. Spidey 3 failed because it was overcrowded. Amazing 2 failed because of being overcrowded, combining elements from other comics, being a time waster, rewriting characters, wasting a big moment, and then filled up to the top with stupid sauce. I'm comfortable going into Amazing 2 without seeing 1 because I read the comics. I've read a good chunk of them, including side stuff like the Ultimate line. So anything that I missed, I'll pretty much understand. I felt sorry with the amount of stuff put into this film to all the casual people. Amazing 2 and Star Trek Into Darkness were the last times I gave anything written by Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci a blind chance. Now how do I talk about the movie? Any one of the plot lines could have been a movie on its own. Electro's origin, Peter's parents, Gwen Stacy's death, Harry becoming the Green Goblin, and then they have Ultimate Spider-Man's Rhino just to blow up this sinking island more. How did anyone think stuffing all these plot lines into one movie was a good idea? They had to even push it further when they snuck in Felicia Hardy. I know, maybe it wasn't really Black Cat. The credits don't list her last name, but with the amount of crap and character alterations going on, don't tell me they weren't referencing her. How many characters were connected to Oscorp? It was ridiculous. Okay, what can I say that's good about the movie? Peter's parents' fate. It's something that I never really cared about personally. I don't hate the backstory. I just thought it wasn't really that important to elaborate on, especially when it involves characters on the Disney side, licensing and all this other junk. But if I had to say one thing that they got right, was them recreating the death of his parents. It's the only thing they matched from the comics. Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. Him, like Maguire and Holland, they're all fine as Peter Parker. They're not perfect. There's been changes done to Parker in the movies, but I never hated Garfield in the role. Good actor. I remember him in Doctor Who. Thank you for doing a good New York accent and not going overboard. The actors in general, no problems. It's what's given to them to speak. That's the problem. The music score of the movie is one of my favorites. Hans Zimmer came up with the perfect Spider-Man theme. I bought the damn soundtrack for a movie I hate. And of course, there are moments where we are seeing Spider-Man be Spider-Man. The way the movie visually shows us Spider-Sense during the Times Square fight, he has to stop a car from flying into people. One of his web shooters was blown out. Him scanning all the people running away, preventing them from being shocked to death. That's a pure Spider-Man moment. And I guess I should also mention a fun bit that happened to me. Aunt May's house in the Amazing movies is actually located in Brooklyn and not canonically Queens. I was there the day they filmed the establishing shot and porch scene. I passed it all the time whenever I went on a lunch break to grab pizza. I'm there all the way up the block on the right. I knew a movie was filming on the street a few days before. Filming companies alert the whole block to move their cars. In most cases, they lie what movie they're filming. I remember the title was some dog film. I knew it was fake, but by luck, I decided to pop around the area just to watch it. And remember, I didn't watch the first film, so I didn't even know this was May's house. I couldn't see much. The road is a small one-way street. The trees got in the way, plus crew trucks and barriers blocked it. I was also not allowed to take photos, but I got to hear them act. I've been to a few other film locations. I caught Daredevil being shot a few times, and the second Smurf movie was filmed in the park that's a few blocks from Aunt May's house. I guess Sony Scouting must have loved this area. It hurts when I see the potential of a great film, but then messes up hard. I'm not going to be kind to this movie. I guess I should begin with Rhino. Now, basically, to give you guys some background, the Rhino done in the film is a mixture of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic line with the regular comic line. Instead of being the large guy in a Rhino costume, he uses an experimental mech suit shaped as a Rhino. What's the Ultimate Comics? It's basically a line of comics that ran alongside the regular comics, similar to the 2099 comic line done in the 90s. Ultimate was basically a glorified What If series, where the writers changed aspect of characters, like what if the Fantastic Four were teenagers when they got their powers, with very little originality, hence Rhino in a mech suit. Some will probably say, well, what's the big deal? It's still an element from the Marvel comics, but when you introduce changes to something that is already established, it can cause problems down the line. With this change, they caused a plot hole. My first objection is having Rhino in the movie at all. The movie is jam-packed with so much junk, and you're introducing us to another Spider-Man villain, on top of the scene probably having the most patronizing bit of dialogue I've heard in a while.
Plutonium-238 is a radioactive material and is highly explosive.
No Sherlock, that's why it has the radioactive symbol on it. You can argue that Oscorp material all have these computer voice prompts. They do it another time when Max is trying to fix the power systems, but who the hell would ever do such a thing? It's not a funny joke, and you can see it was clearly added in post over both scenes, since no one ever reacts to the prompts. The biggest issue this brings, remember after the chase when Spidey finally catches Rhino by webbing up his arms? A few seconds earlier, he was able to pull the canister out of Spider-Man's webs. I guess he gained super strength for 5 seconds. This wouldn't have been a problem if this was the proper Rhino from the comics and them not trying to do that mech suit reveal at the end. The whole chase scene could have happened the same way, except by Rhino ramming cars through the street with his head and not with the truck. It's always better to stick to the source material to avoid things like this. Just like Pokemon 20 years ago, incorrectly translating lines about Brock's mom being dead, when in Pocket Monsters, Takashi's father says no such thing. That's why she just appears in Pokemon Chronicles a decade later. Gwen Stacy's death. It's extremely iconic in the comic. It was one of the earliest times when a character was lost. Back when death had meaning. Marvel and DC all ruined that now. It was nice that Stacy was in the film. There was many love interests for Parker. MJ doesn't have to be the only one. Also, fans of the Spectacular Spider-Man series are happy to see Gwen. But you kill off the character in the second movie? Are you kidding me? Do you know how much you just skipped over? The stories, the problems of being with a superhero? Gwen should have been in several more films. When Parker and her are having that serious discussion in Chinatown, it's a good moment, but it's all rushed. Him wanting to love her but fighting back his feelings, this scene would have worked so much more better if, say, it happened after the Venom saga. That's one of Parker's lowest moments. He's vulnerable, doesn't trust himself, he was nearly taken control of. We're missing the growth of him going from teenager to adulthood. It's not paid off right. And the missed opportunities between a movie that has both Gwen and MJ in it. Especially Gwen, already knowing his secret from the first film. Why rush all this? Don't companies want to make a whole bunch of movies with characters? You'll rush out the door 10 Disney Plus Marvel shows, but you don't want to commit to 6 pictures for Spider-Man? It's more aggravating when in Amazing 1, her father told Parker to break up with Gwen to protect her. But in the comics, he's the exact opposite, telling Parker to stay with her, which is what makes it more devastating for Peter. He failed Gwen, but he also failed to honor Captain Stacy's last dying wish. I never understand changes like this, but if the comic version was used, characters get developed. No, we gotta ram everything in 2 movies, screw it up, then have to do reboots. For the actual death moment, Andrew gave his best performances here and at the funeral, and thank you for filming in a cemetery that's in Queens. Great moments like this piss me off. Like everything else, things were altered from the comic, both for no real good reason. Originally, Norman Osborn was the one who got her killed. This was changed to Harry. Second, they wanted to be artistic and reference the comics, so they decided to change the entire location of where it happened. Probably everyone knows, but the reason why they cut back and forth so much of the clock face is because the hands end up at 121. Gwen died in issue 121 of the comic. I mean, I'm all for referencing things, but not during such an important moment. This is about Peter and Gwen, his grief, and they reworked the entire fight just for a reference. If I was working on this, I would have kept it as close as possible for the comic. You want to reference the comic, do the panels justice. What hurts more, the scene where Parker and Harry are talking is at Jane's carousel. If you know Brooklyn, it's to the right of the Brooklyn Bridge, which by luck also has the double clock tower apartment building. There's your perfect bow for your reference with using the actual location where it happens in issue 121. If I had to have the number somewhere, just a subtle nod. The time reads 1:14 a.m. and the scene lasts for 7 minutes. It'd be there for people who would catch it, but never cut to over actors. This is the defining moment of Garfield's Spider-Man. That's why he goes full circle in No Way Home. A for acting, F for changing things for no reason. It's also great that we have the worst moment in Parker's life and the movie just cuts to the funeral. Green Goblin's up there, knocked out, the one who's responsible for Gwen's death. What would anyone do in such a state? What's better story-wise? 2 pointless scenes with Rhino or Parker deciding to cross a line? Nah, I gotta sell merch. Electro time. He might as well been an original character. I even felt like the writers were outright insulting comic fans. Except for the name and power set, there's nothing of the original character left. If they had decided to come up with an original villain, great, as long as you're not bad like Nuclear Man. But if you're telling me this is Max Dillon, then do Max Dillon. In the film, he suffers from hearing voices in his head. He becomes obsessed with Spider-Man to the point of creating these fantasies. He works at Oscorp, of course he does, and is treated pretty crappy. But the worst thing is the way he got his powers. If you were trying to kill yourself by getting electrocuted, he did everything right. Touching metal, not shutting off the power, not wearing gloves, climbing up on unsafe railings, and handling an active power line. If you know the comic character, he's one of the few people who's actually pretty smart, and it wasn't his fault on how he got his powers. He got randomly electrocuted by a freak lightning storm. They even poke fun right before he changes by doing the, "Oh, you thought he was gonna die this way? Gotcha!" The writers also thought it'd be a cute parallel. Spider-Man got bitten by a spider, let's have Max go through the same thing, but worse. None of the changes were needed. The comic had a more logical origin that didn't make Max look like a fool. And it also did give you a moment to feel sorry for him like the movie did. He killed the man with his new powers. That was his turning point. I don't even want to mention the whole itsy bitsy spider moment in the film. They did Electro dirty, but not as dirty as my man, Harry Osborn. So, we have a failed payoff in Spider-Man 3 with his arc being smashed within 2 other villains. But you thought you could do better by introducing us to Harry Osborn and in the same movie, turn him into the Green Goblin without building up that connection and rivalry to Peter. It gets so much worse. Writers, do you really think we're stupid? Well, you have this virus that kills Norman Osborn. Tell us it's genetically passed down, but for some reason, Norman died in his 50s, but Harry develops it within a week, deteriorating faster than his father did. conveniently all at the same time. It's almost like you had to figure out a way to get him into the suit. I should remind everyone that Harry was going to the extremes with trying to get Spider-Man's blood, then the venom. That means the virus was already a danger to his life. If Harry had decades like his father, he'd have decades to look for a cure. No reason to do anything rash except for a ticking clock. Not to mention for a plotline that originally wasn't supposed to have him in the first place. If you had a problem with redoing a villain that was done in Tobey's movies, then don't do Harry Osborn. Don't do Green Goblin or Gwen Stacy's death. There are tons and tons of plot lines that you could have adapted. The Spider Slayers was an option. That would have featured JJ more. But no, you're rushing with everything. We barely get to know this Harry Osborn. Tons and tons of exposition happen between Peter and Harry. They haven't seen each other for 10 years. So let me get this straight. At the start of the movie, Peter is graduating high school. That means he was 8 years old the last time they saw each other. They're basically different people at that point, but they're acting like they didn't see each other since college or something during the pier scene. All this stuff with Harry, then with the parents' mystery stuff, I'm getting overloaded. And your goal was to set up a Sinister Six movie? Look at what happened. Because the movie rushed everything out the door, trying to use famous comic moments to bring in the feels, plus all the crap that happened behind the scenes with Sony, Amazing Spider-Man didn't happen. I was so disappointed with the second film. Even if you want to ignore all the comic errors, just looking at it as a movie, the pacing is abhorrent. Harry is an a-hole because his father treated him like dirt, so you're going to just act like him? Nice job. Electro's a complete moron, and Rhino is some generic bad guy. Alright, how can I fix the movie? A lot of it has to be scrapped. Gwen's death, delete. Harry, delete. Peter's parents' mystery, delete. I would like to do Peter's parents' backstory, but because it involves Red Skull and the whole issue with the characters being between Disney and Sony, I'd rather not bother with it. The two villains I would focus on would be Electro and Rhino. If we have to get the Sinister Six started, these two are the best to be put together. They're complete opposites personality-wise, but they both work in similar fashions. So thematically, they fit within the same movie. So then you have Peter be forced to deal with two villains, which have very different powers, they think differently. This could bleed into the early stages of relationship problems between Gwen and Peter. She knows a secret, understands that the city needs Parker, but also she starts seeing the toll that's going on with his body. She's worrying about him more, then she starts thinking about all the things that can go wrong. I would actually keep the graduation scene the same way, with the exception that Rhino is already Rhino. The genetically modified Rhino from normal Spider-Man, but later in the film have a flashback of him being experimented on, then attacking the people who turned him into the Rhino. Electro, obviously give him the proper origin story, make him not stupid, and they become the current rivals of Spider-Man. Max would be the more focused on, since Rhino wanted the powers, it was his government that screwed him up. Max was just this regular dude who got turned into Electro. He wasn't evil just yet, but the murder of that guy, he has more of a story to work Spider-Man in. Maybe Spider-Man finds out what happened to him, much like the events in Amazing 1 and Kurt Connors. He attempts to help him, Electro takes advantage of that kindness. You could also have small references here and there with the people Electro or Rhino does jobs for. I'd actually try to not team them up in the normal sense. Instead, it'd be more a happenstance that the final battle would have Rhino join in on the fun, killing Spider-Man. The movie can be there to set up future things. Electro and Rhino can't be killed, obviously. You don't need to do that all the time in these films. Then in Amazing 3, you got Rhino set up. We can do the Black Suit Spider-Man story while they continue to build up the Sinister Six in the background. I'm glad that No Way Home was able to redeem Andrew Spidey. So many things just went bad with this film. I honestly would want him to get another movie. I don't want his series to end on this junk. Go back to basics, give him something interesting and new, then close him out.